The world owes $315 trillion. That's not a typo. 315 trillion. The United States alone is drowning in $38 trillion of debt. China owes $18 trillion. Japan nearly $10 trillion. Germany, France, the UK, all buried under mountains of borrowed money. But here's what doesn't make sense. If everyone is in debt, who are they paying? China owes trillions, but China also owns over $800 billion of American debt. America owes China, but American banks also hold Chinese bonds. Europe owes America, America owes Europe, Japan owes everyone, and everyone owes Japan. It's like a bizarre financial circle where every country is both drowning and being paid at the same time. So, who's actually owed? Where does all this money come from? And more importantly, where does it go? The answer isn't what you think. And once you understand it, you'll never look at money the same way again. This is the dollar logic, where we break down the systems that run the world, the ones they don't teach you in school, the ones hiding in plain sight, and nothing is hiding quite as effectively as the global debt machine. The ancient root debt isn't some modern invention dreamed up by Wall Street bankers. It's one of humanity's oldest ideas. 5,000 years ago in ancient Mesopotamia, farmers would borrow seeds in spring. When harvest came, they'd pay back with grain, usually a bit extra as thanks. No paperwork, no credit scores, just a promise between neighbors. That's all debt really is. Borrowing from your future self to solve a problem today. For centuries, it stayed simple, person to person, village to village, but then empires got involved. The birth of government bonds. In 1694, England had a problem. They were at war with France, and the king was out of gold. The royal treasury was empty, and nobody wanted to lend to a desperate monarch who might lose and never pay you back. So England tried something revolutionary. Instead of asking one rich person for all the money, they'd ask thousands of regular people for a little bit each. In return, they'd get a written promise, a bond guaranteeing repayment with interest. It worked. The public funded the war. And to manage this new system, they created the Bank of England. This wasn't just clever accounting, it was a paradigm shift. For the first time in history, a government could spend money it didn't have yet. Money from the future could pay for wars today. And if it worked for war, why not for everything else? The empire of paper France copied it. The Netherlands refined it. When America won independence, Alexander Hamilton immediately adopted the system. He knew that the ability to borrow was the ability to build. By the 1800s, government bonds became the foundation of global finance. Empires stopped conquering land for gold. They issued paper promises for interest. The battlefield became the balance sheet, the Bretton Woods system. Fast forward to 1944, World War II is ending and the world's economies are in ruins. Leaders gather at Bretton Woods in New Hampshire to rebuild the global financial system from scratch. They needed stability. So they tied every currency to the US dollar, and the dollar was tied to gold. $35 bought you 1 ounce, fixed, stable, reliable. For a while, it worked. But there was a problem. The world was growing faster than the gold supply. America was spending more than it had gold to back up. By 1971, President Nixon faced a choice: keep the system and run out of gold, or break the system and keep spending. He chose spending. On August 15, 1971, Nixon ended the gold standard. Money was no longer backed by anything physical. It became what we call fiat currency, backed only by trust in the government that printed it. And if money was just trust, then debt could grow infinitely, as long as that trust held. Now, the explosion from that moment, global borrowing went parabolic. In 1980, total global debt was around $30 trillion. By 2000, it hit $80 trillion. By 2008, $140 trillion. Today, we're at $315 trillion and climbing. That's nearly 4 times the size of the entire global economy, 4 times everything humanity produces in a year. If you stacked $1 trillion in $100 bills, it would reach from Earth to the International Space Station. Now imagine doing that trip 315 times. That's how much debt exists. Every country borrowing, every bank lending, every bond multiplying, but to who?
The American loop. Let's zoom in on the United States, the most indebted nation on earth, $38 trillion owed. That's more than the next 3 countries combined. You'd think someone powerful must be holding all that debt. China, maybe, or oil rich Gulf states. But here's the twist: about 70% of American debt is owned by Americans. Wait, what? The US is borrowing from itself? Yes, here's how. Your savings are their loans. When you deposit money in a bank, it doesn't sit in a vault with your name on it. Banks immediately put that cash to work. They lend it out, invest it, and yes, they buy government bonds. Right now, American commercial banks hold nearly $2 trillion in US Treasury bonds. That's more than the entire economy of Canada. Pension funds, they've parked over a quarter of their assets in government bonds. Insurance companies, over 60% of their money is in bonds. Your retirement account, your savings, your life insurance policy, they're all funding the national debt. The government borrows from these institutions and pays interest. That interest flows back into your retirement fund, which then uses it to buy more bonds. It's a loop, a perpetual cycle where money never really leaves the system. It just changes hands. You are both the debtor and the creditor. You just don't realize it. The global web now scale that up. This loop isn't just national, it's planetary. Japan holds about $1 trillion of US debt, but Japan also owes $10 trillion to its own banks, pension funds, and foreign investors. Those same investors hold bonds from Europe. European funds own debt from emerging markets, and emerging markets park their foreign reserves in, you guessed it, US Treasury bonds. It's a daisy chain that circles the globe. Everyone owes, everyone is owed. The entire financial system is a tangled knot of IOUs. Picture a poker table where every player has borrowed chips from the person next to them. The game only works if nobody tries to cash out. Who's really in charge? So if it's all circular, does that mean nobody's really in control? Not quite. Behind this web sits a network of massive institutions, central banks, sovereign wealth funds, pension giants like BlackRock and Vanguard managing tens of trillions in assets. These aren't just passive lenders. They're the gatekeepers. They decide which countries can borrow cheaply and which will pay a premium. They decide if a government is trustworthy or risky. When they lose confidence, currencies collapse, interest rates spike, governments fall, elections decide who governs, but markets decide who survives. The money printers. And at the very top of this pyramid sit the central banks, the Federal Reserve, the European Central Bank, the Bank of Japan. They don't just manage debt. They create it. Every time the Federal Reserve buys a government bond, it doesn't pay with money sitting in a vault. It creates new dollars out of thin air, digital entries on a balance sheet. The bond becomes an asset, the dollars become a liability, and just like that, more money exists. This is called quantitative easing, and it's how central banks have pumped trillions into the economy over the past 2 decades. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Every dollar in your wallet, every euro, every yen represents debt somewhere in the system. There's no such thing as debt-free money anymore. Money is debt. Debt is money. They're the same thing. The myth of repayment. When you or I take out a loan, we're expected to pay it back. Save up, work hard, clear the balance. But governments don't work that way. They're not trying to pay off their debt. They never were. That's not a conspiracy, it's policy. Instead of paying back old loans, they issue new bonds to cover the old ones. It's called refinancing, rolling over the debt, kicking the can down the road forever. The United States will never clear its $38 trillion tab. Japan's debt is now 250% of its economy, and it just keeps borrowing more. Why? Because the system depends on it. Debt fuels growth. Here's the thing nobody wants to admit. Debt isn't just a burden. It's the engine. When governments borrow and spend, money circulates. Workers get paid. Businesses earn revenue. Those workers and businesses spend more. A feedback loop that keeps the economy expanding. In China, 1 in every 5 yuan spent by the government is borrowed. In the US, it's 1 in 4. That's equivalent to the entire federal education and welfare budgets combined. What happens if they stop? Money stops flowing. Businesses earn less. People lose jobs. Spending dries up. The economy contracts. It's not theoretical. We've seen it.
The Greek collapse. In 2010, Greece ran into trouble. Investors panicked and stopped buying Greek bonds. Suddenly, Greece couldn't borrow anymore. And without borrowing, they couldn't pay salaries, pensions, or public services. The government was forced to cut deeply. A quarter of public workers were fired. Wages fell 30%. GDP shrank by 25% over the next few years. An entire generation lost jobs, savings, and hope, all because the borrowing stopped. Politicians know this. Voters know this too. Nobody wins elections promising cuts. Everyone wants the government to spend, so borrowing continues. It has to. The crisis exception. And it's not always about growth. Sometimes it's about survival. When COVID hit in 2020, people stopped spending overnight, businesses closed, tax revenue collapsed. The only way to prevent total economic collapse was for governments to step in and spend on behalf of everyone else. In a single year, the US borrowed $3.8 trillion, nearly 20% of the entire economy. Europe did the same. So did China. So did everyone. It wasn't optional. It was the only move. But here's the problem. If you're already spending everything you collect in taxes, and now you've borrowed trillions more, where does the money come from to pay it back? Simple. You borrow again. The infinite loop, and that's the secret. Modern sovereign debt isn't designed to be repaid. It's designed to be rolled over indefinitely. As long as investors believe the government will keep paying interest, they'll keep buying bonds. As long as the bonds keep selling, the government keeps borrowing. It's a closed loop of trust, and trust so far has held. But trust isn't free and it isn't evenly distributed. Who benefits? When people say we owe it to ourselves, that's only technically true. Yes, much of the debt is held domestically, but the interest payments don't flow evenly. They flow upward from taxpayers to bondholders, from workers to investors, from the many to the few. Debt isn't just a transfer between countries, it's a transfer between classes. The people who own bonds, pension funds, banks, and wealthy investors, they earn interest. The people who pay taxes foot the bill. Over time, that interest compounds. Wealth concentrates. Global inequality and global debt have risen in lockstep. That's not a coincidence. The debt trap. For wealthier nations like Germany or Switzerland, this system is manageable. Their bonds are seen as safe, so they borrow at low rates. Rolling over debt is cheap and easy. But for developing countries, it's a different story. Higher risk means higher interest rates, and higher rates mean more of the budget goes to servicing old debt instead of building schools, hospitals, or infrastructure. Countries like Sri Lanka and Pakistan have found themselves in debt traps, borrowing just to pay interest on past loans, the debt feeding on itself. Eventually, there's nothing left for the people. The fragility, even rich countries aren't immune. As debt grows, so do interest payments. More of the budget gets locked into paying lenders, not funding the future. Debt to GDP ratios near 100% used to be catastrophic. Now they're normal. The US, UK, France, Italy, Japan, all above it. This works fine when borrowing is cheap and lenders are confident, but confidence is fragile. If investors start doubting a country's ability to pay, interest rates spike. Suddenly, borrowing costs more. The debt grows faster. Confidence drops further. A feedback loop in reverse. The nuclear option, printing money. Governments facing this have one escape hatch: print more money. Sounds simple, right? Just create cash and pay off the debt. Problem solved, except it's not. When you flood the system with new money, each unit becomes worth less. That's inflation. Prices rise, savings shrink, people feel poor. In extreme cases, it spirals. Venezuela in the 2000s printed so much money to cover debts that prices doubled every few weeks. A loaf of bread that cost 10 bolivars suddenly costs millions. The currency became worthless. People's life savings evaporated overnight. Even moderate inflation erodes trust, and once trust is gone, the whole system unravels. The default: when a country can't borrow, can't print, and can't pay, there's only one option left. A default is a government saying, we can't pay. It's the sovereign equivalent of bankruptcy, except there's no court to restructure the debt, no clean slate. Defaulting destroys a country's credibility. Investors flee. Borrowing costs skyrocket for decades. The economy collapses. Argentina has defaulted 9 times in its history. Each time it takes years to recover. And even then, the scars remain. Default is the end game, the thing everyone fears, the reason the loop must keep spinning.
Can it go on forever? So here we are, $315 trillion in global debt, a system built entirely on rolling promises, a perpetual loop of borrowing, lending, and refinancing, and the uncomfortable question nobody wants to answer: can this actually continue forever? Theoretically, yes, as long as trust holds, as long as people keep believing governments will pay interest, as long as central banks keep printing money when needed. But trust is not a law of physics, it's a collective agreement, and agreements can break. The tipping point. We've already seen cracks. Greece, Argentina, Sri Lanka. These weren't accidents, they were symptoms. What happens when a major economy, not a small nation, faces the same crisis? What happens when investors lose faith in the US or China or the Eurozone? The entire web unravels because remember, it's all connected. Everyone owes everyone. If one thread snaps, the whole tapestry tears. Some economists believe we're approaching that point. Debt levels have never been this high. Interest payments are consuming larger portions of budgets. The next crisis might not be containable. Others argue the system is resilient, that central banks have more tools than ever, that as long as economies grow, debt can grow alongside them. Both could be right, or both could be wrong. The real answer. So, who does the world owe money to? On paper, it's banks, pension funds, foreign governments, and investors. But dig deeper, and the answer shifts. The world owes money to itself, a planet-sized mirror reflecting debt back and forth in an infinite loop. But that doesn't mean everyone shares the burden equally or the benefit. The system rewards those who own debt, punishes those who only pay it, and the gap between them keeps growing. Debt isn't just numbers on a balance sheet, it's power, it's control, it's the invisible hand shaping every government decision, every economic policy, every crisis response. And the only thing keeping it stable is belief that the system works, that the money will keep flowing, that tomorrow will look like today. But belief is the most fragile thing in finance. And the modern world isn't built on gold or oil or even technology. It's built on promises, promises to pay, promises to lend, promises that tomorrow the system will still be standing. And as long as we keep believing, the debt keeps growing, the loop keeps spinning. But the moment we stop, that's when we'll find out what all those trillions really mean. If this changed how you see the world, hit subscribe. There's a lot more under the surface, and I'll show you where to look